They say a ghost from your past can't hurt you. They're wrong, because on my way to my grandpa's will reading, a ghost from my past not only warned me, it saved my life. I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes, haunted by the image of that truck. One second, I'm cruising down the interstate. The next, a semi-trailer swerves right into my lane, its horn blaring like a final judgment. My car spun, flipped, and slammed into a barrier. The crash, the sirens, the shattered glass, it all came and went in a blur. But what stayed with me was the silence afterward, the taste of blood in my mouth, and a chilling thought, this wasn't an accident. Look, if you've ever felt like your own family has a secret they're keeping, like they're plotting something behind your back, then hit that subscribe button right now. Seriously, smash it. You'll get to see how I dug myself out of a hole they put me in, and how I finally exposed the truth. And if you've ever had to fight to be seen or heard, comment down below with a, "My name is Alex Reed. I'm 29, a freelance journalist living in Phoenix. And a few weeks ago, my life was, by all accounts, exactly where I wanted it to be. My tiny apartment smelled of old books and fresh coffee. My dog, Buster, was my best friend. And I was about to land a big investigative piece. I had worked for every inch of that success, every late night, every rejected pitch. I came from money, but my family never seemed to think I was worth any of it. My father was a media magnate who saw me as nothing more than a lost cause. He always favored my older brother, Mark, the golden child, who was given a corner office and a trust fund before he'd even graduated college. Me, I was the one who refused the family handout and decided to make it on my own. I never cared about the money. Not really. All I ever wanted was a little respect, a little acknowledgement. But my family wasn't built on that. It was built on silence, on unspoken disappointments and debts that could never be repaid. The only one who ever truly saw me was my grandpa, a stubborn old-school newspaper man. He told me that true worth isn't in the headlines, but in the bylines you earn. And his death had left a crater in my life, a void that was about to be filled with the worst kind of betrayal. His funeral was a spectacle, a parade of suits and crocodile tears. My father shook hands with strangers, smiling for the cameras, while my mother, ever the dutiful wife, dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. They were grieving for a legacy, not a person. Mark, my brother, offered a short, empty eulogy about my grandpa's unwavering business sense, and I just stood there, biting my tongue, listening to him desecrate the memory of a man who taught me the value of a single, honest word. Afterward, as we gathered at the reception, my family seemed to glide through the crowd, like sharks in a sea of champagne and small talk. They spoke of the upcoming will reading, their voices low and calculating, as if my grandpa's last wishes were just another business deal to be negotiated. I saw Mark whisper something to my father, his eyes darting toward me. I knew what they were doing. They were cutting me out, assuming I was too naive to see it coming. That night, alone in my apartment, the phone rang. It was my father. His voice was cold and clipped, a tone he reserved for bad news or business rivals. "Alex, listen. Mark secured an agreement from Henry Wallace to read the will in 2 weeks. Be there." And then he hung up. No condolences, no questions about how I was holding up, just a sharp, transactional demand. I stared at my phone, the screen still lit up, feeling a familiar ache in my chest. The same ache I'd felt every time my efforts were dismissed, every time my existence was inconvenient. I didn't know then that this was the first step in a plan to get rid of me for good. This wasn't just a will reading. It was a war. And I had no idea I was about to become the main target. They say you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. Growing up, I didn't get a choice in either. My family just was, and I was always on the outside, looking in. The truth is, my family wasn't just a unit. It was a hierarchy. At the very top sat my father, a man who saw the world in dollar signs and quarterly reports. His firstborn, Mark, was his prized investment. Mark was the son who did everything right. He played lacrosse, got into a good college, and was groomed to take over the family business from the day he was born. He was the golden child, and everyone knew it. My mother, she wasn't a villain. Exactly. She was more like a supporting actress in my father's life, always catering to Mark's needs, always making excuses for his behavior. She'd get this soft, almost apologetic look in her eyes when she talked to me, like she knew it was unfair. But she couldn't or wouldn't do anything about it. I was just Alex, the second child, the quiet one, the one who didn't fit into the meticulously planned future my father had laid out. I still remember my 9th birthday. I wanted a simple party, just a few friends. But my father had a business dinner, and my mother was busy organizing a surprise party for Mark, who had just made the varsity baseball team. My father had clapped me on the shoulder, a cold, formal gesture, and told me, "We'll celebrate later, son." Later never came. I sat on my bed, eating a slice of cake my grandpa had brought me, watching my parents and Mark laugh from the dining room window. I wasn't angry, just empty. That feeling, that hole in my chest, it only grew bigger as the years went on. I never asked for much, so when I was old enough, I decided to leave. I went to a state school on a scholarship I earned myself. My father had scoffed. "You're throwing away a free ride to a top-tier school," he'd said, referencing the Ivy League schools he'd planned for me and Mark to attend. What he didn't know was that what he was offering wasn't a free ride. It was a cage. I wanted to be free. I worked part-time jobs, took out student loans, and paid my way through journalism school. It was hard, but it was mine. Meanwhile, Mark was living the life I'd walked away from, and he resented me for it. He saw my independence as a form of rejection, a critique of his own choices. He'd call me, not to chat, but to brag about his latest promotion or a new luxury car my father had bought him. And with every call, I could hear the sneer in his voice, the thinly veiled insecurity. The dynamic only got worse after my grandpa's health started to fail. My grandpa, a man who built a media empire with his bare hands, had always treated me with a respect my own father never did. He saw my drive, my passion for the truth, and he nurtured it. I used to visit him every week, long after everyone else had stopped. I'd sit by his bedside, listening to his stories about the old days, about what it took to be a real journalist, a real man. One day, he'd looked at me, his eyes tired but clear, and said, "Alex, the truth is a weapon, but only if you have the courage to use it." I just nodded, not knowing how those words would come back to haunt me, not knowing that my family was already planning to use the very legacy he was so proud of to cut me out of his life forever. The days passed, and I continued to visit my grandpa, to sit and talk to him, to watch the way he clung to every word I said, how his face lit up when I told him about my latest story. Mark and my parents never came. They were too busy, they said, handling the important business of their lives. But I knew the truth. They were too busy making their own plans, counting the money they assumed they would inherit. And I didn't care about the money. Not then. All I cared about was my grandpa. He was the only one who saw me for who I was. I just wish I'd seen the storm coming. I wish I had known that my loyalty, my sacrifice, would only make me a bigger target. Because the closer I got to my grandpa, the more I was walking right into their trap. Sometimes you work your entire life for something, not for a medal, not for a paycheck, but for a single word. The word is proud, and I would have done anything for my father to say it. Just once. A few years ago, I was on the cusp of a huge career breakthrough. I had been working on an investigative story for months, digging into a corrupt deal involving a powerful real estate developer. It was the kind of story that wins awards, The kind that can launch a career. The kind my grandpa would have been proud of. I was about to sign the contract when my phone rang. It was my father, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Alex, your brother is in trouble." Mark had gotten into a major legal mess with a rival media company, a lawsuit that could have ruined him. My father's tone was cold, urgent, like he was delivering a verdict. "You have to fix this." My father didn't ask. He commanded. He told me to use my sources, my contacts, everything I had to find a way out for Mark. I remember standing in my tiny apartment, looking at the contract on my desk, and feeling the weight of that call. I knew this meant I had to put my career on hold. The editor of the magazine I was working with told me I was crazy. "You're throwing away a golden opportunity, Alex." I knew it too, but the voice in my head, the one that kept telling me to prove myself to my father, was louder. It was a sick kind of loyalty, the kind that tells you that you're a part of something, even when you're being pushed to the edges. So, I did it. I spent weeks using my contacts to dig up dirt on the rival company. I went through thousands of documents, made dozens of calls, all to find a loophole, a way to save my brother. It was a brutal, thankless job. While I was pulling all-nighters, Mark was posting photos on social media of him on a yacht with my father. He was laughing, drinking champagne, not a care in the world. He was the golden child, and I was the mop, cleaning up his messes. When I finally found a way to resolve the legal issue, my father called me again. But this time, his voice was different. It wasn't a thank you. It was a cold, satisfied hum. "Good. You handled it well. Mark's out of the woods." And that was it. Not a thank you. Not a "I'm proud of you, son." Not even a simple "good job." He gave all the credit to Mark, who stood beside him, grinning from ear to ear, as if he had been the one who'd spent weeks tirelessly working on the case. It was like I hadn't even been there. I was a ghost, a useful, invisible ghost. The betrayal hit me harder than any physical blow. I felt like a fool. I had sacrificed my own success for a family that didn't even see me as a person. But the most painful part was seeing Mark's smug expression. He looked at me with a condescending pity, as if to say, "You'll always be the one cleaning up after me, Alex. You'll always be in my shadow." And he was right, because a few months later, I was on the brink of losing my apartment, struggling to make ends meet, while Mark was celebrating his new promotion. A promotion he got because of the very legal mess I had cleaned up. The tension at family dinners became unbearable. Every conversation revolved around Mark's triumphs, his latest acquisitions, his plans to expand the family business. My father would nod, his eyes gleaming with pride. My mother would smile, a hollow, empty smile, and I would sit there, silent, my blood boiling. I wanted to scream, to tell them everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed. But what was the point? They wouldn't have cared. They never did. But I never stopped trying to get their approval. A few months before my grandpa's passing, I learned about a business rival of my father's trying to make a hostile takeover. This was a man my father had admired for years. I knew I had to do something. So I started digging. I found out the guy had been secretly funneling money from his company into a shell corporation. I knew this was my chance. My chance to prove myself. My chance to finally be seen. I presented the evidence to my father, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. He looked at the documents, his face a mask of indifference. He just sighed. "Alex, why can't you just focus on your own life? Mark is handling the business. This is not your problem." And he just tossed the papers aside. I walked away, my legs numb, my vision blurred with unshed tears. I had never felt so invisible, so insignificant. I didn't know then, but that was the day my trust in my family truly died. It was just the beginning of the end. That morning, I woke up with a bad feeling in my gut. It was the day of the will reading, and the tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was due at the law office downtown in a few hours, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was like a knot in my stomach, a cold dread that had been growing ever since my father's call. I tried to talk myself out of it. It's just a meeting. Alex, it's just paperwork. But my mind kept replaying the conversation from last night. I'd called Mark, hoping to get a handle on the situation, hoping he'd at least give me a heads up on what to expect. He just laughed. "Relax, Alex. It's nothing you need to worry about. Just show up and sign on the dotted line." His voice was dripping with condescension, a familiar tone that made my skin crawl. Dad and I have everything under control. Under his control. That was the most chilling part of the whole conversation. He was so confident, so smug, like he already knew the outcome. He didn't even try to hide his disdain, and I felt a pang of shame. Why did I even bother calling him? He'd never been a brother to me. Just a rival. He'd spent his entire life trying to prove he was better than me, and I'd spent mine trying to prove I was worthy of their love. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of coffee, and my phone buzzed with a message. It was my mother. "Don't be late. Your father is getting impatient." There was no warmth, no motherly concern, just a cold, transactional reminder. It was a perfect snapshot of our relationship. It was a facade of family that was always just on the verge of cracking. I looked at the clock. It was time to go. I knew I had to face them. I owed it to my grandpa, the one person in my family who had ever truly loved me. I had to be there for him, for his legacy, even if it meant facing the people who wanted to take it all away. I grabbed my car keys, and as I walked out the door, a sudden gust of wind slammed it shut behind me. It was like the universe was telling me to turn back. But I ignored it. I had to go. The drive was quiet. Too quiet. The highway was eerily empty, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, my heart would clench, convinced that a car was tailing me. I tried to calm myself down, to think logically. I was a journalist, not a paranoid wreck. I had been in much worse situations. I had chased down corrupt politicians and crooked businessmen. But this was different. This was my family, and the stakes were higher than they'd ever been. As I took the off-ramp toward the city, I saw a familiar sight, a black SUV with tinted windows that had been a few cars behind me for the last 20 minutes. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, and a shiver of fear ran down my spine. It was a professional-looking vehicle, the kind my father's company used. It was too much of a coincidence. I sped up, hoping to lose it, but it kept pace, a silent predator stalking its prey. I swerved into a side street, my heart pounding in my chest. The SUV followed, its headlights a pair of cold, unblinking eyes in my rearview mirror. Panic set in. This wasn't a warning. It was a threat. I knew they were planning to get rid of me, but I didn't think they'd go this far. I thought it would be a legal maneuver, a clever trick to cut me out of the will. I never imagined they'd try to kill me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't just trying to hurt me. They wanted me gone for good, and I was driving straight into their trap. I saw a dead end ahead, and my heart sank. There was nowhere to go. I was trapped, and I was about to pay the ultimate price for believing in a family that never believed in me. This was it. The end of the line. I thought my life was over. But then, a ghost from my past showed up. The black SUV swerved, cutting me off just before the dead end. The world narrowed to my rearview mirror, filled with its two cold, unblinking headlights. There was nowhere to go. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming. But it was too late. I closed my eyes, bracing for the impact, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. In that split second of utter terror, a flicker of light appeared in my mind's eye. It was Mark, not my brother, but my best friend. Mark. The Mark I'd lost in a car crash 7 years ago. He was smiling. That crooked, carefree smile I'd thought I'd never see again. His image was translucent, ethereal, yet so real I could feel his presence in the car with me. He didn't say a word, just pointed. Not at the black SUV, but at a small, overgrown side road I hadn't even noticed. It wasn't a road, really, just a dirt path swallowed by weeds. He pointed again. A silent, urgent command. My heart was pounding. My mind racing. Is this it? Am I hallucinating right before I die? I didn't have time to think. Instinct took over. I wrenched the steering wheel, the tires leaving the asphalt and hitting the gravel path. My car bucked violently, a cacophony of scraping metal and flying rocks. The SUV behind me didn't hesitate. It followed, the driver clearly surprised, but still on my tail. The path was narrow, and tree branches whipped at my windshield, scratching and groaning. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and Mark was gone. All I saw was the black SUV gaining on me. Panic flared, but then the path widened, opening up to a clearing. I saw a small, rusted sign, a forgotten, condemned lot. I was trapped. But then Mark appeared again, this time right next to me. He was standing outside the passenger window, his hands pressed against the glass. He pointed again, this time at a single ancient oak tree in the center of the clearing. His expression was serious now, his eyes filled with a desperate urgency. He mouthed 2 words. Underneath, dig. I didn't know why, but I trusted him. I floored it, the engine roaring, and swerved just in time, my car screeching to a halt right next to the massive tree. I cut the engine, yanked my keys, and didn't even bother to close the door. I scrambled out of the car and sprinted toward the tree, my heart in my throat. The black SUV pulled into the clearing, its tires spitting up gravel. A man in a dark hoodie got out, his face obscured by shadow. I felt a surge of pure terror. My mind was screaming, "Run, Alex!" Run, but I couldn't. I was frozen, my legs leaden. The man started walking toward me, slowly, deliberately. I looked at the base of the oak tree, my mind reeling. Dig. What was I supposed to dig for? What was here? My eyes scanned the ground, frantic, and then I saw it. A small, barely visible metal box buried in the dirt at the base of the tree. A metal box with a single, familiar inscription. The truth is a weapon. Alex! My grandpa's words. The man was getting closer. I could hear his footsteps crunching on the gravel. I knelt, my hands trembling, and clawed at the dirt. My nails broke. My fingers bled. But I didn't stop. I dug and dug, until my fingers found purchase on the cool, metallic surface of the box. I wrenched it from the ground and stood up, clutching it to my chest. Just as the man reached the tree, he lunged for me, a hand gripping my arm, his voice a low growl. "Where is it? Give it to me. Now!" I twisted, pulling away with a force I didn't know I had, and I ran. I ran for my life, the metal box a cold weight in my hands. The man cursed behind me, and I heard the sound of footsteps giving chase. But I was fast, fueled by adrenaline, by the sheer, unadulterated terror of knowing my own family was hunting me down. I didn't look back. I just ran. I ran until I couldn't breathe, until the world was a blur of spinning trees and gasping breaths. I finally collapsed in a ditch, hidden by a thicket of bushes. The black SUV passed me, its headlights sweeping over the road, and I held my breath, clutching the box. When the sound of the engine faded into the distance, I let out a long, shuddering breath and collapsed back into the mud. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I looked at the metal box, its surface smeared with blood and dirt. My grandpa's words stared back at me. A silent, powerful promise. I opened the box, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold it steady. Inside, there was an old cassette player, a cassette tape, and a small, leather-bound journal. A shiver ran down my spine, a mix of fear and an electric, terrible curiosity. I fumbled with the cassette player, my heart pounding in my ears. I pressed play, and a voice I hadn't heard in 2 months filled the silence of the night. My grandpa's voice. "Alex, if you're listening to this, it means they've come for you." His voice was calm, steady, and it instantly soothed the panic in my chest. I knew they would. I saw it coming a long time ago. Your father's greed, your brother's envy. It's a poison. He paused, and I could hear him sigh. I never told you this, but I knew what they were doing. I knew they were planning to get rid of you, but I couldn't fight them on my own. I had to wait for the right time, for you to be ready. The tape clicked, and his voice was replaced by another. My father's, cold, clipped, and full of a venom I'd only ever suspected. He was talking to Mark, his voice a low, calculated hum. "The will reading is in 2 weeks. He has to be gone before then. Make it look like an accident. I don't want any loose ends." I felt my stomach lurch. It was real. They had tried to kill me, not just to take my money, to end my life. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, hard rage that settled deep in my bones. My own family, the people who were supposed to protect me, they were the ones who had tried to kill me. The tape continued. I heard Mark's voice, full of a sickening smugness. "Don't worry, Dad. I've got it covered. He's been an annoyance for too long. He'll get what's coming to him." The audio then shifted to a different setting, a different conversation. It was my mother. Her voice, usually so gentle, was now a razor blade. "I just don't want there to be a mess. Gregory, we have a reputation to uphold." My father's voice, as cold as ice, replied, "There won't be. He's just a victim of circumstance." I sank to the ground, the tape player a dead weight in my hand. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a conspiracy to commit murder. And I was the target. The ghost of my friend, Mark, had led me here. My grandpa had known all along. He had trusted me to find the truth, to use it as a weapon. The last part of the tape was just my grandpa's voice, soft and final. "The truth is a weapon. Alex, now you have it. Go and use it. Don't let them win. Your life, your legacy. It's all in your hands now. I'm so proud of you, my boy. Now go get your justice. And don't you ever give up on yourself." My hands tightened around the tape player, the words a burning fire in my soul. I wasn't scared anymore. I was a weapon, and I was coming for them. The air was thick with the dust of betrayal. My hands were still shaking as I sat in the cab, the cassette player and the journal in my backpack, the evidence a cold weight against my spine. I was numb, but beneath the numbness was a fire, a rage so pure it burned away every last shred of doubt I had. My own family, the people who were supposed to love me, they had tried to kill me. The thought was a sledgehammer to my soul. I wasn't going to the will reading. Not yet. I was going to them. I knew they'd be at the family estate, in their glass and steel prison of a home, celebrating my assumed demise. I told the cab driver to go there, and the entire ride felt surreal. The world outside the window was moving, but I was in a bubble of silent, simmering rage. I walked up to the front door, the same door I had walked through countless times as a child, hoping for a hug that never came. This time, I didn't knock. I just turned the handle and walked in. The house was silent. Too silent. They were in the sunroom, drinking mimosas, their laughter echoing through the empty halls. I saw Mark first. He was sitting with my mother, a smug look on his face, a glass of champagne in his hand. He hadn't even bothered to wait for the will reading. My father was on his phone, a cold, calculating look in his eyes. He saw me first. His face went white. The phone dropped from his hand, and it clattered on the floor. The sound was deafening. My mother's eyes widened, and her glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile floor. She let out a small, terrified gasp. Mark, my brother, just stared, his mouth agape, his face a mixture of shock and terror. Alex, he stammered, his voice a ghost of its former arrogance. You were in an accident. I looked at them. My family. These people who had plotted to kill me. And I felt nothing. No love. No pity. Just a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't their son anymore. I was a stranger with a score to settle. Yes, I said, my voice as cold as ice. You wanted me dead. My father's face hardened, the shock giving way to anger. What are you talking about? Are you insane? We were worried sick about you. He looked at my mother, a silent command in his eyes. My mother started to cry, her shoulders shaking, but I didn't believe her for a second. The tears weren't real. Oh, Alex, darling, we were so afraid. We heard about the accident. We called the hospital, but they wouldn't tell us anything. It was a masterful performance, a perfect rendition of a grieving mother. It would have worked on anyone else. But I had the truth. I walked toward them, my steps deliberate, a silent promise in every one of them. Don't bother, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I know everything. Mark scoffed, his arrogance returning. What do you know? Alex, you're delusional. You're always so dramatic. He looked at my father, a smug, knowing look in his eyes. He's probably just looking for attention. Dad. My father nodded, his face a mask of indifference. Just go home. Alex, we'll handle everything. I pulled the cassette player from my bag and set it on the glass table. You might want to hear this first, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I pressed play. The room was silent, and then my father's voice filled the air. The will reading is in 2 weeks. He has to be gone before then. Make it look like an accident. The blood drained from my father's face. My mother's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Mark's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated fear. That's a fake, he stammered, his voice trembling. That's not us. I looked at him, my heart a hollow, empty space. It's you, Mark. I heard it. I heard all of it. I pressed another button, and his voice filled the room. Don't worry, Dad. I've got it covered. He'll get what's coming to him. The three of them stared at the cassette player, their carefully constructed world of lies crumbling around them. My father lunged for the player, but I was faster. I grabbed it, my knuckles white, and held it to my chest. Don't touch me, I said, my voice filled with a finality that brooked no argument. It's over. My father glared at me, his eyes filled with a cold hatred. You'll regret this, Alex. You're ruining everything. You're ruining your family, I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You ruined this family a long time ago. All I'm doing is telling the truth. I looked at my mother, her face streaked with tears that were finally real. You knew, didn't you, Mom? You knew all along. She just sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I looked at Mark, my brother, the man who had plotted to kill me. He was standing there, silent, defeated, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No anger, no hatred, just emptiness. They were strangers to me, all of them. I turned and walked out of the house, the door slamming shut behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I had what I needed, but I didn't feel any sense of victory. I felt numb, A part of my soul had been ripped out of me, and it was gone forever. I walked the streets for hours, aimless. The cold reality of my family's betrayal, a leaden weight in my stomach. I was alone, truly alone, and I didn't know what to do next. I felt like a shipwrecked survivor, drifting in a sea of my own making, with no land in sight. I pulled out my phone, 100 names in my contact list, but none of them felt right. I couldn't call anyone. I couldn't tell anyone what my family had done. It was too shameful, too painful. But then, I saw a name I hadn't thought of in years. Sarah, my old editor, the one who had told me I was crazy for throwing away my career. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over her name. What would I say? I swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and hit dial. She picked up on the third ring. Alex, I haven't heard from you in years. What's wrong? Her voice was warm, and for the first time in hours, I felt a crack in my emotional armor. I couldn't lie. Not to her. I'm not okay. Sarah, I said, my voice breaking. Something terrible has happened. And as I told her everything, the whole sordid story of my family's betrayal, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a survivor. And I knew, for the first time in a long time, that I wasn't alone. I was a ghost. For weeks. I lived like one. My father, my mother, and my brother, Mark, had been taken into custody. The charges were swift and heavy: conspiracy to commit murder. The legal system was a cold, unforgiving machine, and it was grinding them to dust. Sarah, my old editor, became my lifeline. She helped me navigate the lawyers, the police, and the media storm that exploded. My family's carefully constructed empire crumbled, and their names were dragged through the mud. Their crimes plastered on every news outlet. They went from media moguls to pariahs overnight. The same news channels my father had owned were now broadcasting his downfall to the world. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. But it faded fast. It wasn't victory. It was just an ending. A sad, pathetic ending. The final will reading was held in a stark, cold courtroom. The air was thick with tension. Not from greed this time, but from the weight of what had happened. My father, Mark, and my mother sat across from me, their faces hollow, their eyes filled with a defeated emptiness. The smirks were gone. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the crushing reality of what they had done. They looked like ghosts of the people they used to be. The lawyer, Henry Wallace, looked at them with a mixture of sadness and contempt. He spoke slowly, deliberately, his voice echoing in the empty room. As per the final wishes of Mr. Reginald Stone, he said, I have to read this addendum. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The addendum, he continued, his voice unwavering, states that if any of Reginald's heirs were to act against the others with malice, or attempt to harm or defraud them in any way, their share of the estate would be immediately revoked and given to the heir who has been wronged. The room was silent. I looked at my family, and their faces went from denial to a horrifying realization. They had planned to kill me for nothing. The estate was divided equally among all of us, and in their greed, they had conspired to take it all. But in doing so, they had triggered the very clause that would take everything away. They had stolen from themselves. By law, their crimes meant they were entitled to nothing. My father's eyes locked with mine, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see anger or coldness. I saw raw, unfiltered hatred. He had gambled everything and lost. Mark just stared at the table, his head in his hands, defeated. My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, pleading grief. But it was too late. I'd learned my lesson. There was nothing left to forgive. I had to let them go. I stood up and walked out of that courtroom, leaving behind the wreckage of a family that had never been a family at all. I thought the money would bring me peace, that it would make everything right. But it didn't. For a long time, the money felt like a ghost, a constant, chilling reminder of the people I had lost. I didn't want it, but I realized something. My grandpa hadn't left me money. He had left me a weapon, a tool to build a new life, a new legacy, not on a foundation of lies and greed, but on a foundation of truth. He had always told me that the truth was a weapon, and now I knew what he meant. The truth had saved my life. The truth had set me free. I decided to use the money to build a media company, not a legacy of lies and manipulation, but a company dedicated to telling the truth. I partnered with Sarah, my old editor, and we started small, just the two of us, dedicated to giving a voice to the voiceless, to uncovering the stories that mattered, the ones my father's company would have buried. I finally felt a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. The hole in my chest that had been there since I was a child was finally beginning to heal. My past was a part of me, but it didn't define me anymore. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. And you know, the ghost of my friend, Mark, I still think about him. Sometimes, I feel like he's watching over me, a silent guardian, a reminder that there are good people in this world, people who will stand by you no matter what. My grandpa was right. The true worth of a man isn't in the money he makes, but in the bylines he earns, and in the people he chooses to stand by him. I am not the man my father wanted me to be. I'm the man my grandpa was, and I'm finally, truly, free. Hey, if you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever felt like you had to fight for your own truth, then you are not alone. There's a whole community of us out there. So, if this story resonated with you, and you want to see more stories of resilience, more stories of truth, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment below and tell me your story. But most importantly, smash that subscribe button. Because when you subscribe, you're not just supporting me, you're joining a community of survivors.